What's up, Green Bay Packers fans? Welcome back, and as always, thank you for joining me. My name is Paul Brettel. I'm the site editor at Dairyland Express, where we cover the Packers, Brewers, Bucks, and Badgers. I also have a new article out every Monday and Friday over at Cheesehead TV. And as it says at the bottom of the screen here, you can follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. So it looks like the Green Bay Packers roster is set, at least for the time being. Although just a few days ago, we saw how quickly things can change. Green Bay would sign edge rusher Kobe Jones, who they had in for a tryout during rookie minicamp. They would also sign tight end Eli Wolf, and in the corresponding move, release wide receiver Chris Blair. As Brian Gutekunst often says, roster building is a 365-day-a-year job, so more moves will ultimately come, just the nature of the business. But again, for the time being, it looks like the roster is set. And so for today's episode, we're going to discuss an article that I have up over at Dairyland Express. You can find the link in the description below. It's my 7 big questions, all centered around this Green Bay Packers roster. So we might as well start with the big one, right? The wide receiver position. Did the Green Bay Packers do enough at wide receiver this offseason? Now, I imagine many out there are going to say no, and I totally understand why. But when we look at what this wide receiver room needed, other than just wide receivers, Matt LaFleur mentioned before the draft, this was actually at the NFL owners meeting, that they wanted to add some speed and playmaking. So when we look at types of receivers that this Packers offense needed, they needed that vertical threat, someone to take the top off the defense. Some added playmaking, yak ability was also on the checklist, and they also need that go-to option on third down. Well, we know they checked 2 of those boxes in the draft with Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Samori Toure. They check that vertical element and that playmaking yak ability. Christian Watson has that 4.36 speed, can take the top off of defenses. I think he averaged over 21 yards per catch during his time at North Dakota State. Can also be used as the motion man on gadget plays, has experience out of the backfield. Basically, find a way to get him the ball in space and let him go to work. Romeo Doubs, again, was another big play threat at Nevada. In 2020, and these numbers are from PFF, he was third among all receivers in downfield passing yards. So these are passes that travel at least 20 yards through the air. So he was making big plays downfield for much of that season. And then there's Samori Toure, who averaged just under 20 yards per catch this past season at Nebraska. So again, Green Bay added that playmaking ability. They added that yak ability. Now, of course, there's still some unknown because these are rookies. How quickly are they going to gel with Aaron Rodgers? How quickly are they going to acclimate to Matt LaFleur's system, which can be a complicated one at that. But the question that we still have, the elements are there, as I mentioned, playmaking, vertical threat. But the question we still have is, do the Green Bay Packers have that? Do they have that bucket getter? It's 3rd and 6. You need those 6 yards. Who are they going to go to? At this time, there's no one that really stands out. Obviously, hopefully, Christian Watson develops into that role. With Sammy Watkins, it could be that guy. We know that Al Nazard and Aaron Rodgers have tremendous trust. Randall Cobb last season came up big several times, numerous times, I should say, in third down situations. It could be one of those things where it's fluid week to week. It's going to be a different guy who steps up in those moments. But at this moment, right now, we don't know who that's going to be or what that's going to look like. So to answer the question, did they do enough? Maybe. A lot of it's going to depend on a number of other factors. Of course, we need the rookie receivers that we just mentioned. We need them to progress as the season goes on. We need them to gain Aaron Rodgers' trust. We need them to come through in those big moments. But in addition to that, Matt LaFleur, he has to scheme these guys open. This receiver room, obviously, without Davante Adams, obviously isn't as good as it was a year ago. Matt LaFleur's play calling, his ability to scheme guys open, that's going to have to be, it already was a big part, but it's going to be even more of an emphasis now because you don't have someone like Davante Adams who can just get open on their own, and Aaron Rodgers can lean on them heavily. In addition to that, you need Aaron Rodgers to go and be Aaron Rodgers. Back-to-back MVP, the 4-time MVP. He needs to elevate this wide receiver room. On top of that, the offensive line play should be improved this season. Not that it was bad last year, but it certainly took a step back from 2020, which, of course, should have been expected with all the injuries and movement that they had. But just in getting healthy, the added experience that Runyon, Myers, and Newman gained last year, now entering year 2 or year 3 in Runyon's case, the competition that'll be there this summer, we'll get to that more shortly. And then the running back, they have arguably the best running back duo in football. Robert Tonyan will also be back at the tight end position. And then at least on paper, this defense certainly looks like it can be a top 5 unit in the NFL. So when you add all those elements together, Again, the wide receiver room is going to be worse off without Devontae. But when you add everything we just mentioned, that can hopefully lift up the receiver room and reduce that gap that's been created by the absence of Devontae Adams. So to try to provide some sort of answer to this question, if those other elements happen, and again, they're not all going to at the same time, they're not all going to gel week to week, but collectively overall throughout the season, if those other elements can happen, yes, I think this receiver room is good enough to go and win playoff games this season. So the next big question that I have is, are the Green Bay Packers going to make any free agent additions this offseason? So let's start with the salary cap. According to Over the Cap, Green Bay has about $10.8 million in available cap space. However, they still have a few draft picks, I believe 4 of them that are unsigned. So that's going to take away some of that cap room. They also have to sign the practice squad at some point. That is not accounted for either. The 52nd, 53rd players on the roster are not accounted for. That salary cap figure is just the top 51. And then, of course, Green Bay is going to want to have some money for in-season. So you can sign someone like Rasul Douglas, or in previous seasons, Snacks Harrison, Jared Valdir, Tyler Irvin. So when you add in all those other expenses that aren't included in that $10.8 million, Ken Ingalls, Packers salary cap guru over on Twitter, he estimates that the Packers are actually $1 million over the salary cap. Again, not currently, but once you bake in all those additional costs. Now there's other cap creating moves that they have available. The extension for Jair Alexander, which I still think is going to happen at some point here. That's the big one. That could create $6-7 million in cap space this season while still making Alexander the highest paid cornerback in football. A much smaller move, Green Bay could look to add voided years to Allen Lazard's restricted free agent deal, lower his cap hit this year. They did that last year with Robert Tonyan. So there's moves available. And again, I think even with those expenses, those additional moves will give Green Bay a little bit of spending power to add a veteran minimum contract or two over the summer. And it's worth pointing out, Andy Herman of Packer Report, he tweeted this out recently. If we rewind to this exact day a year ago, for example, Devondre Campbell, Corey Bojorquez, Rasul Douglas, Dennis Kelly, they were not members of the Green Bay Packers. So, and they all ended up playing significant roles on this team. So from that perspective, I do think that, yes, there's going to be some additions made to this roster still, some tweaking. 2 positions that stand out, and I'll go into in-depth more on them here in a bit, is edge rusher and cornerback. And of course, I know receivers top of mind for everyone. There's that report from Ian Rappaport earlier this week that it's a good receiver market for Green Bay. Julio Jones, Odell Beckham Jr., Jarvis Landry, who was just signed by New Orleans, but I don't think that's going to be in play for them. One big reason, each of those receivers kind of comes with a but. Odell Beckham Jr. would be a terrific fit, but when is he going to be fully healthy? And also, what kind of contract is he going to demand? Julio Jones, again, he could be that bucket getter that I referenced earlier for Green Bay. It's 3rd and 6. Of course, you want to go to Julio, but it's worth noting he's played in just 19 games last 2 seasons. He's missed 13. In addition to that, he seems like someone who's just going to be outside of what Green Bay can offer at this point, given their salary cap situation. So those are obviously important factors in all of this. But another element is where are the Green Bay Packers going to put them on the roster? So traditionally, and again, traditionally with the Green Bay Packers under Brian Gutekunst has kind of gone out the window. He's certainly zigged and zagged a lot more than what Ted Thompson had, or what Ted Thompson did. But 6 wide receiver spots already accounted for. That's traditionally what the Packers keep. Allen Lazard, Amari Rodgers, Randall Cobb, Sammy Watkins, Christian Watson, and Romeo Doubs. That's 6. Doesn't include Samori Toure, who potentially could be the 7th if he can provide some special teams value or show that he can during the summer. So not to say that the Green Bay Packers wouldn't keep 7 receivers, obviously, if they signed Julio, but from the players that I just mentioned, those 6, they are going to be members of this Green Bay Packers team this year. No question about it. So again, that's just another element to consider in all of this. But again, to answer the question, yes, I do think that Green Bay is going to add another receiver. Another free agent, but I just don't think it's going to be a receiver or any sort of big name that may still be out there. Question number 3, what will the Green Bay Packers offensive line look like week 1? So prior to the draft, and I felt that this flew a little bit under the radar, was just kind of the general need for the offensive line. we saw last year how important depth was for this unit. They had 7 different offensive line configurations over the course of the season, but this roster prior to the draft was incredibly thin. The only healthy tackles were Bakhtiari and Nyman, and maybe Cole Van Lanen, if the Packers view him as such. Along the interior, after Myers, Runyon, and Newman, it was Van Lanen, Michael Manet, and Jake Hansen. That was it. There was going to be no sort of competition over the summer, and the Packers were one injury away from being in a world of hurt and with facing some serious question marks. However, that is not the case anymore. Green Bay added Sean Ryan, Zach Tom, and Rasheed Walker. Now, I don't necessarily think that at this point in his career, Walker is going to push for those starting reps, but Ryan and Tom absolutely can. Gutekunst and LaFleur mentioned that both have the ability to play tackle, so we could see each of them competing with Yosh Nijman, which I think is certainly a good thing. Nijman held up well last season, all things considered, but he hasn't played right tackle since his final season at Virginia Tech. And he also has only just over 600 career NFL snaps. He's not at a point in his career where you're just going to assume he's a starter. Competition is needed, so that'll be there. In addition to that, Ryan could play either guard positions, and then Tom could play either guard positions or even center. Now, I mentioned Bakhtiari is who I would Sharpie in at left tackle as the only starter that I feel confident in saying at this point in time that I know is going to be there and where he's going to be. Runyon and Myers I would pencil in at this point. But again, we're going to see a ton of movement along the offensive line over the summer as Matt LaFleur tries to find, as he says, the best 5, because the cornerstone of this entire offensive line is versatility. And so he'll have the ability to mix and match throughout the summer to find that best combination. And perhaps, it could be Zach Tom at center and Josh Myers at guard. We know he has that flexibility to play guard. I mean, even on the Packers website, on the roster page, he's listed as a center and a guard. So we'll have to see how it all plays out, but it's tremendous. It's a very, very good thing, the amount of competition that's going to be there this summer. Because, again, the only position I would Sharpie in right now is Bakhtiari at left tackle. I think everything else is up in the air. Although, as I mentioned, I would certainly consider John Runyon, Josh Myers favorite for those positions, but we'll have to see. It's going to be a lot of movement over the summer, and it's going to be a lot of great competition as well, and that's always a good thing. Next up, do the Green Bay Packers have enough depth at edge rusher? My initial thought is no, even with the addition of Kingsley and Nagbar in the 5th round. So last year, even as good as Rashawn Gary and Preston Smith were, both were top 10 in the NFL in pressures generated, according to Pro Football Focus. After them on the depth chart there was just a lack of impact plays against both the run and the pass. And edge rusher is a heavily rotated position. Gary and Smith were on the field for about 68% of the defensive snaps last season. So that's about 1/3 of Green Bay's defensive snaps that they were on the sidelines. That's a good portion of the game. And with that, again, there was just a lack of impact plays, specifically against the run. So if we look at someone like Kingsley and Nagbar, I do think that he can be an improvement, provide some juice against the pass, third downs, obvious passing situations. But if there's an area of his game that he needs to improve, it's going to have to be against the run. You hope someone like Jonathan Garvin, Tipa Nyalai can take those steps forward in year 3. But again, Tipa, specifically with his size, I think he's always going to struggle a bit against the run just because he is of that lighter frame. And Jonathan Garvin, he's entering his 3rd season, but he's a 7th round pick. There's no guarantee either with it that he's going to take that step forward. Randy Ramsey will also be returning, but for those reasons, I think it would be very valuable to add a veteran edge rusher to this room. Outside linebacker coach Jason Rebrovich mentioned that he wants a rotation of 4 players. So we know who 2 of those guys are, but who are the other 2 going to be? And, that's going to be another interesting competition to watch this summer. But with how heavily rotated edge rusher is, with just how important it is in the game of football to get after the quarterback and the number of question marks that the Packers have beyond Smith and Gary, again, I think that could be a position that Green Bay does look to address. But I still have my doubts, my unknowns, especially against the run and how this group can hold up. I do the same thing when we talk about edge rushers. When we look at edge rushers, we talk about pressure, sacks generated, but how they can hold up against the run is also incredibly important. And that is one of the bigger question marks that I have about this unit outside of Smith and Gary. Next up, Why didn't Green Bay select a receiver, or excuse me, a safety or a tight end? Now, I know they took Tariq Carpenter in the 7th round, but Matt LaFleur would tell reporters after the draft that he's going to spend time in the inside linebacker room. So we're going to consider him an inside linebacker, at least for the time being, or until we see otherwise. But the reason why I thought safety would be on Green Bay's target list is, one, it was a very good class to choose from within those first 3 rounds or so. In addition to that, Green Bay needed a third safety. Henry Black was on the field for almost 300 snaps last season. He's no longer on the team. And when it comes to the depth behind Amos and Savage, Vernon Scott has 90 career snaps. Sean Davis in his games, they don't have any. And then as we look to 2023, it's not, the depth of that room doesn't improve, gets worse. The only safeties under contract a year from now are going to be Darnell Savage and Vernon Scott. So for those two reasons, the lack of reliable depth, the inexperience, the few bodies that they have under contract in 2023 at the safety position, that's why I thought that they would address this need somewhat early on in the draft. However, two big factors in why they didn't, now that we've had the time to take a look back, is one, how the board fell. That's, in the draft, that's always going to be one of the biggest determining factors to really any question. It's all about how the board falls and if the right value is there at the right position at that specific time. The other reason is the Packers drafted Quay Walker, linebacker, in the 1st round. With him on the field, his versatility, his ability to play both the run and the pass, we're going to see a lot more of that base nickel defense from Green Bay, which consists of 2 linebackers, which means there isn't going to be nearly as often a third safety on the field for Green Bay. So that less reliance on having that third safety on the field also could have played a factor in their decision not to address the position early on as well. Tight end, kind of similar to the safety position. As we look ahead to 2023, the only tight end under contract is Josiah DeGuara. This year, it's going to be a crowded room, and that could have certainly played into why Green Bay didn't feel the need to address tight end early on either. It's going to be Robert Tonyan when he's healthy, Mercedes Lewis, Josiah DeGuara, Dominic Daphne, and then Tyler Davis. He's going to be in the mix as well. He's someone who saw his role expand as the 2021 season went on, especially once Tonyan got injured. He's a very willing blocker, high effort blocker, and we know how important that is. He also made a few receptions, but one in particular stands out. It was against Baltimore. It was a 22-yard reception down the seam where Rodgers was rolling out of the pocket as he was about to get hit. Davis had 2 or 3 defenders around him, and Rodgers was able to connect with him. I know that sounds, doesn't sound very newsworthy by any means, but given the situation, the type of throw that had to be made, the defenders in the area, to some degree, it does show a level of confidence that Rodgers has in him. And that's, as we know, important to note as well. So following the draft, Brian Gutekunst mentioned that, and this is paraphrasing, but it was along the lines of, I think we have something there, in reference to Tyler Davis. So if the Green Bay Packers only intend to keep 4 tight ends, they're going to have a tough decision to make. One of those 5 players I just mentioned are going to be cut. Obviously, it's not going to be Tonyan, Lewis, or DeGuara, so it'd have to be one of the other 2. Or maybe they choose to keep 5 tight ends, but then you're taking away from another position as well. So if you had added a rookie to that mix, say they took a 3rd-round tight end, now the crowded room becomes even more crowded. So looking back on it, that I think that had to be a big factor in not addressing the need, especially with us not knowing how highly within the organization the Green Bay Packers think of Tyler Davis. So there's a name to keep your eyes on this summer and as the preseason unfolds. Next question: did the Green Bay Packers find their return men? So special teams as a whole last year, abysmal. We all know that. This includes the punt and kick return units. As a punt returner, Amari Rodgers was indecisive with the ball in his hands, struggled to catch, make those catches cleanly. Malik Taylor, as the kick returner, once Kylan Hill was injured, just struggled to make any sort of, to bring any sort of playmaking ability to that unit. And I will say the kick return blocking was not good at all. So it's not 100% on Malik Taylor's shoulders, but of course, upgrades can be made. And the Packers, in addition to boosting their wide receiver room, they may have also boosted their return units as well. Christian Watson was an All-American at North Dakota State, had 26 career kick return attempts, averaged 26.4 yards per return. Romeo Dobbs had 37 career punt return attempts, took one for a touchdown, and averaged 12.4 yards per return. A really impressive number. And so those two, they may end up being the guys that Green Bay relies heavily on to, you know, bring a spark, some playmaking ability to their kick return units. Now, two things to consider with all this is one, of course, being on special teams compared to just offense. There's an added injury risk. So that's something that Matt LaFleur is going to have to weigh because both these players should end up playing a somewhat big role on the Green Bay Packers offense at a receiver position where they really can't afford, to suffer an injury or two. So that's something that Matt LaFleur is going to have to weigh. And on top of that, just because they have the experience in college, the success in college, that doesn't mean it's going to translate to the NFL level either. Amari Rodgers, he had 68 career punt return attempts during his time at Clemson. However, there were numerous times last season where it looked like that was his first time being back there. So it's exciting what the Green Bay Packers added, especially when you consider the athleticism, playmaking ability that Watson and Dobbs bring along with that experience. But those are two important things to keep in mind as well to temper expectations. It is the Packers special teams unit after all. Lastly, should the Green Bay Packers be concerned about their cornerback depth? They have Jaire Alexander, Eric Stokes, Rasul Douglas, arguably what may end up being the best cornerback trio in football. But as good as those three are, there's an equal amount of question marks on the depth chart behind them. Shamar John-Charles, he has 38 career defensive snaps. Keyshawn Nixon, who was signed just this offseason and is likely going to be a big special teams contributor, he has just over 200. And then we get into players like Raleigh Texada, an undrafted rookie, obviously no NFL snaps. Keandre Thomas, KB Nento, no NFL snaps either. So there's a lot of youth, a lot of inexperience behind the Packers' big three at the cornerback position. And of course, just a season ago, we saw how important cornerback depth is. So again, they're if there's an injury, they're going to be relying heavily on someone who has very little experience. On top of that, while Jaire Alexander may end the season with the most slot snaps in the secondary, that's not the only place he's going to play. Brian Gutekunst has even acknowledged this. Where Jaire lines up is going to vary week to week depending on the opponent. If the opponent's top receiver primarily plays on the boundary, that's where Jaire is going to be. If the top receiver moves around, slot, boundary, left, right, that's where Jaire Alexander is going to go. So again, my question is, when he's on the boundary, who's going to play in the slot? Stokes had very little experience there last year. Rasul Douglas has very little experience over his career. Again, it's probably the answer to the question is probably going to be week to week. If there's a speedy slot receiver and Jaire's on the boundary, maybe Stokes goes inside. If it's a big pass catching tight end like a Travis Kelce, maybe Rasul Douglas takes him in the slot instead, to better play those matchups. But again, the experience at slot, it's very thin. Now, it's not to say that there aren't players on this roster who can find success. But again, from the outside looking in, we don't know. We don't know the answer to those questions, which is why it's on my list here, because there's a lot of inexperience and a lot of youth that Green Bay may have to end up relying heavily on at some point this season. So there you have it. Those are my 7 big questions about this Green Bay Packers roster at this point. You can find the article in the description below. Give me a follow on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. I always appreciate you guys tuning in. If you like the video, please hit like, please hit subscribe. I do greatly appreciate it. And as always, we'll be back with another video shortly. But until then, friends, take care, stay safe, and go Pack Go.